I want to share with you a fun time in my life. It's a time when I met Oprah and we talked about the things that are most important. One of them was, what's the difference between a personality and a soul? Who are the crew members in your personality? Anger, resentment, jealousy, competition. When you speak or act from fear, it's tough. It's tough because you're experiencing painful physical sensations in your body. You're not having a smooth sail through life. In fact, you're being blown about. And when you choose to act and to speak from love, the sailing is good. That was my first sense of the impact of a daytime television show that reaches 12 million people 5 days a week. And that was the beginning of a life that was very different for me. And people ask me, aren't you grateful for Oprah that she put you on national daytime television? Do you thank her? I thank the universe. I've been looking forward to this podcast with you, and I want to share with you a fun time in my life. It's a time when I met Oprah, and I want to give you the picture of what that fit into. I was living in Mount Shasta. That's a small mountain community. It's in Northern California, and it's named after a magnificent 14,162-foot summit, and it's gorgeous. It filled my life. I lived there for 13 years, and every time I saw it, and I saw it everywhere, I was so grateful to be alive and to be alive there. Linda and I were enjoying ourselves. We had been together for several years, and we both moved into my little camp cabin, which was, I wish you could see it. It was just perfect. It was in some tall cypress trees with a stone walkway and a stone chimney and Shasta lilies growing along the base. And it wasn't very big, but it was lovely. And I had my computer in the back looking straight up to Mount Shasta. And I savored and I shared that view for 13 years. That's where I was. And I love the outdoors. That's one of the reasons that I moved to Mount Shasta, and I spent almost all of my time there except when it was dark. In the summer, I was hiking or looking for new trails, kayaking, mountain biking. In the winter, I did the same thing, but on skis, both backcountry skis, and we had a little ski resort, so I could do alpine downhill skiing. And my community there was really sweet. It was the first time I'd been in a community. It was a spiritual community, but it wasn't dogmatic. There were no icons, no prescribed dress, although there was a lot of white. And we loved each other. And there was a lot of music in this community, both the people that were in the community and troubadours that were traveling through, and greeted heartily when they arrived and sent off heartily when they moved on, only to return the next summer. And that's when I got a call from a woman that I don't know. She had an unusual name, and it was Oprah, of course. And I didn't know exactly why she was calling, but she called, and I enjoyed talking with her. And then we said goodbye. And then she called back again. I think it was months later, or maybe time's flexible in my mind. But she called back again. And again, I enjoyed talking with her. She's friendly and engaging and present. And again, I wasn't really sure why she was calling, but I enjoyed our call. Then, sometime later, I got a call from one of her producers. And he said, would you like to come to Chicago to meet Miss Winfrey and be interviewed? I had a television, by the way, but it wasn't connected to anything but a video player, because Mount Shasta is a small place. We don't have a television station. We don't have a radio station either. So I called Linda, who was in San Diego, and I told her what the call was about. And I said, what do you feel about going? And Linda said, let's go. I mean, she was really excited. So she flew to Chicago and I flew to Chicago. And that's when we met Oprah. Linda and I had been in Europe about 3 or 4 months before, and I just had the desire to buy an Italian suit. There's no place for it in Mount Shasta. There's only 3,000 people there, and I know most of them, and they know me. They say, "What are you doing wearing a suit?" But I bought it because I liked it. Well, the first time I wore it was to meet Oprah in Chicago. So we arrived. We were taken by limo to a small apartment. Well, the living room wasn't small. And I said, and Oprah greeted us, and her executive team was with her. We formed a circle, and we had some silence, and and then we decided to sit down together, facing each other. And there was a cameraman with a camera pointed over my shoulder toward Oprah, and a cameraman with a camera over her shoulder pointed toward me. And that's when we began our discussion. And we talked about the things that are most important. I had known by then that Oprah not only liked the seat of the soul, but she had taught it in classes to her employees at Harpo Studios. So she was very familiar with it and touched by it. And her questions were significant questions. And one of them was, what's the difference between a personality and a soul? So in that moment, I thought of a metaphor that I've used since. And in fact, it's in some of the books now. I said, imagine a sailing ship, a big one. And it's so big, it's like a floating city, bigger than you can imagine. Its sails are unfurled, and it's moving in the wind. And around this ship is a fleet of smaller boats. And they're all little sailboats too, and each of them has a captain and a crew. And the captain decides where each of those go. And if the captain decides to go where the mothership is going, the water gets smooth, and the wind blows fair, and all is well. If it decides to veer off in another direction, the water starts to get choppy, swells start to appear, and the wind's not so good anymore. And then if it goes in the opposite direction, it's very painful. You're in gales, hurricanes, blown about. The captain has a relationship with his crew. Believe it or not, he doesn't know all of them. Or she can be a captain too. Some of her crew is always good-natured, very well-trained, conscientious, good sailors. And some of her crew don't know too much about sailing. They're only concerned about themselves. They're always arguing with each other and with all of the crew. The mothership is your soul. Each little boat is a personality, and you are one of those little boats. And you are the captain of your boat. And you may not know all of the members of your crew. Some of them, for example, well, you know the ones that are always arguing. You know the ones that are always angry. But some of them are lazy. Some of them don't want to do the hard work of sailing. And then there's others that you do know. When you choose them, it's really a delight to be a captain. Well, who are the crew members in your personality? I've already named some of them. Anger, resentment, jealousy. Here's some more. Competition, resentment. Every obsession, compulsion, and every addiction. Those are your crew members and more. Who are the crew members that you like to work with? And everyone likes to work with. They are the ones that you experience such as gratitude, appreciation, caring, contentment, patience, and all of the universe. right now, you're on your boat. Right now, you're sailing, and right now, one or more of your crew members are on deck with you. If you're angry, if you're impatient, if you feel superior, for example, and entitled, that's the crew member that's helping you sail. If you feel disdainful, like, I know all this spiritual stuff, I don't even need to be listening to this podcast, that's another crew member. That's not you that's feeling that. It's you, a part of your personality. Each crew member is a part of your personality, and some of them originate in fear. Those are the painful ones that I mentioned. And some of them originate in love. And when you choose to act and to speak from love, the sailing is good. And you're going where you set your sails. And it's not so hard to be at the tiller because you can guide that little boat. When you speak or act from fear, it's tough. It's tough because you're experiencing painful physical sensations in your body. People are arguing with you. You're judging them. You're not having a smooth sail through life. In fact, you're being blown about. That was the metaphor. That was the blessing of speaking for the first time with Oprah. And we spoke for quite a while. And at the end of it, I think Oprah had a vision of me as a woodsman or a woodcutter with a plaid flannel shirt and wide suspenders and a potbelly hanging over my belt and carrying a chainsaw in one hand. But when she saw me in the suit, and after we had our discussion together, she said, "Look at him. I could put him on television." And then as though the thought came home to her, and she said, "I'm going to share this interview with my viewers." And she did. She shared it on Christmas Eve afternoon. And it was a joy. She shared it just as we recorded it. Then I went back to Mount Shasta, knowing she was going to do that. Linda and I did. And nothing too much else happened in our lives except people started buying the Seed of the Soul. I didn't realize how many. Were a lot. And then in April, Oprah called back. And this time she had her executive producer, Diane, with her again. And she said, "Well, Mr. New York Times bestseller, how do you feel?" And I said, "Well, I'm good." And that's when I began to realize how many people were buying the Seed of the Soul. Millions of them. And we talked, and it was good to hear from them again because I really enjoyed being with her. And so did Linda. And then they said, "We're going to have another show in April." And I said, "What's that?" And they told me about the show. And I said, "Oh, that sounds so good. I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to watch it." And they laughed and they both said, "No, Gary, you're going to be on it." And we did. Linda and I flew back to Chicago for our first audience show. And we walked into a show that she was doing otherwise, with someone else. And before, I could hear people squealing as Linda and I came into the studio. There were about 300 people in the studio. And then I realized after a while, I'm the famous person they're squealing about. That was my first sense of the impact of a daytime television show that reaches 12 million people 5 days a week. And that was the beginning of a life that was very different for me. And it was difficult and different at first. Linda and I had a lot of things that we got used to eventually, but one of them was simple as this. We both experienced for the first time what it's like to fly in comfort cross country instead of in a packed economy class seat. After each show, we would meet in Oprah's office, which was spacious and luxurious, very comfortable, to talk about the show, how it could be better, and what we could do next time. But I wasn't present enough to contribute significantly to that. I was doing my best to just be present through all of this. So mostly it was Oprah and Jill, our wonderful producer, Jill Baranczyk, and some of the other production team that came up with the ideas for the next show and how we could make this one better. And after that, my life continued to change. I was used to being in this small mountain community. And now wherever I went, people recognized me. In airports, in a hardware store, in the grocery store. And sometimes they recognized me but didn't speak. Linda would often say, "You see those people over there? They're being respectful of you, but they know who you are." And I could see that. Oprah said, "The people who are going to be drawn to you, Gary, are not like rock star fans." And she was correct. In the 2 years we did shows once a month, there may be, I could count on one hand the number of people who asked me for my autograph. The rest of them said hello, were very respectful, and when we spoke, had interesting questions. And I love sharing with them. That transition from being in the backcountry and a member of a small community in Mount Shasta to national recognition was a bump in the road for me. It was also the universe moving me into another domain of experience and responsibility. And I'm still in that domain, and I'm still loving it. I remember when Linda and I have some friends in the Santa Cruz area. They have a wonderful organization called Heart Math Institute. And they came up to see us, to give us support. And it was in the winter, and we took them up to Bunny Flat on Mount Shasta and gave them some winter clothing so they could slide down a snowfield and enjoy themselves. And when we were standing in the parking lot, I saw a skier coming down and gliding across Bunny Flat. And I knew where he'd been. I knew he'd been in pristine air, clear, cloudless sky, high altitude, alpine energy. Wonderful, invigorating, refreshing, rebirthing. And I told that to Doc. He's not a physician, that's his real name, the founder of Heart Math. I said, "Doc, that's where he's been. That's my life." And he said, "No, not any longer." Gary said, "Yeah, but he hasn't been on Oprah talking to 10 and 12 million people once a day." And when we got back to the cabin, Doc picked up a copy of The Heart of the Soul, which on the back is a book. It's a book that Linda and I co-authored. And on the back has a beautiful picture of Linda and a pretty good one of me. And it's just those pictures. And he picked it up and he said, "Look at this. This is the picture of a movie star trying to wake me up to my new life." And I needed that from my friends. I needed it very much. In fact, I went through a time when I longed to be able to meet again with friends who knew me in Mount Shasta, because there wasn't this recognition, not of me, but of an icon, of an image in their mind of someone that they've seen on television and that they had a good experience with. I haven't seen Oprah a lot lately, but we're still in touch. I feel her. Now and then we talk, and of course we talked more frequently shortly after that series of shows ended. I was interviewed for a short 5-minute segment called Remembering Your Spirit that used to be at the end of every Oprah show. But you can see that after being interviewed for this 5-minute segment, it led to our first audience show and then to another 30 or so shows, episodes. And people ask me, "Aren't you grateful for Oprah as she put you on national daytime television?" Do you thank her? I thank the universe. I know Oprah well enough to know that she didn't do this for me, and she didn't do it for herself. She did it for her viewers. And she's not just like any television show host. She loves her viewers, not just the numbers, the viewers. And she loves her guest. And she's courageous. She's had people on her show who are bigots from the Deep South. And she wants to know, why do you feel the way you do about me? What's in your mind? What goes on with you? She'd ask questions like that, and I admired her so much. I still do. But she put me on her show because Oprah was following her sense of meaning, of purpose. Of course, she's a producer, so she looks at ratings. But I have seen her decline one of the most famous guests at that time in the world, in the entertainment part of the world, because she didn't want that energy on her show. So I know her also as a person of great integrity. And I know that a person of great integrity follows meaning. I'm suggesting that to you who are watching this podcast. If you want to have a beacon in your life, don't let it be fame or recognition or wealth. You can choose anything you like. But in my experience, they don't lead you where you want to go, which is to meaning, purpose, fulfillment, joy, and love. Oprah was following her meaning. She called to meet the author of The Seat of the Soul because it touched her so deeply. And when she invited me to Chicago, it was for a 5-minute segment. But her meaning took her someplace else. So I love Oprah, but I don't say to her, thank you for my big break. Thank you for putting me on television, because that's not the way it happened for her or for me. And she was a wonderful mentor to me. For example, People magazine wanted to put me on the cover of their magazine. And I talked about it with Linda, and we weren't sure that we wanted that many people visually walking through our small cabin. It was a tiny cabin. So I called Oprah to ask her about that. What do you think? And she said, it's cotton candy, Gary. It's only cotton candy. And I understood from that she means it's nothing. It's fluff, just sweetness, and it's not even good for you. It's going to disappear in a moment. So we didn't do it. But everything that I've done with Oprah has been substantive, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful for you so that I can share these things with you, because I love sharing the intimacy of my life. I have a reason for it, and that's to empower you. Now, I need to clarify something. I can't empower you. No one can, except you. But I can share some things that you might be able to use to empower yourself. And that's the reason for this podcast. So join me again. I'm looking forward to speaking with you again soon.